Good morning, everyone. We are going to start our webinar. So in the name of the OID, so the French Green Building Observatory, I am very happy to welcome you today for this webinar. So I am Laura Georgelin, Program Manager at OID, and I will be the moderator of today's session. So just to inform you, the webinar is recorded and will be available on our platform in a few days. Yes, so real estate practices in European firms scaling up ESG issues, that's today's subject in the context of the Green Building Week. Environmental, social, and governance factors are now anchored in companies' practices at national level. Nevertheless, there is a clear demand for real estate actors to address ESG topics and risks in their investments and activities throughout Europe. And it has become a necessity to address European-wide ESG issues. So in this context, the OID is launching a new program, which ambitions will be presented today during this webinar. It's also the occasion to highlight our previous initiatives and those of our partners, because the primary objective of this program is to create a network of actors and experience sharing around these ESG issues. So today, Luis Mulas, the CEO of the OID, will be presenting OID's European program on these issues. And then Sarah Radcliffe, the CEO of the Better Buildings Partnership, will be presenting the BBP's initiative. And last but not least, Anatole Mété-Grolier and Edouard Faudrin will introduce the ACT initiative. So they are from Ademe. So I will not speak longer, and I will just let Luis present you our work and the new OID's European program.
Thanks a lot, Laura, for this introduction. Hello, everybody. As Laura introduced me, I am the CEO of OID. Just a few words for the person who wouldn't know what is OID. We are a non-profit organization, about 100 real estate players focusing on leveling up their ESG practices. We empower ESG issues for the real estate players with tools, normative and technical watch and experience sharings. Until now, we have been mainly focusing and operating in France. Nevertheless, we are launching a new European program today, thanks to the support of several sponsors and European partners. Our main issues are energy, climate change, biodiversity, sustainable finance, and adaptation to climate change. All these issues are addressed within 3 programs. One is governance, the other is the resilient territories, and the third one is decarbonizing the buildings. So you can find a lot of information on our website or Talon. I apologize, until now these platforms are only in French, but this is especially the topic today, to start to translate all the resources we produce in English in order to make it available for any countries. Well, our members, and I will conclude on this about OID, our members are listed and unlisted companies, especially investor, real estate owner, asset manager, property manager, consultancy companies, and general contractors. Our actions are mainly focusing on real estate investor. Today, our community who receive our weekly newsletters is about 1,000 people. And among all these members and these players, some of them have been extending their activities all across Europe in the last years. That is the reason why we decided to launch a new program focusing on developing our knowledge at this European level. So the OID European Program could be launched thanks to the support of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 sponsors until now. Just for you to know, this is not a closed club. If some companies are interested to join us, it is possible. These asset owners and managers have activity all over Europe, and especially in Germany, UK, Netherlands, Italy, and Spain. This will be the countries where we will focus on at the beginning. Then we will continue in the other country. Our program has a duration, minimum duration of 2 years. And what we wish to do is to set this project in a long time. I mean, not only in 2 years, but at least our sponsors are engaged for 2 years. That's it. Well, before explaining what we are aiming, I would just come back a little about the context. First of all, as everybody knows, we are in a warming environmental context with the fall of biodiversity and the climate change speeding up. In France, we are around plus 2 degrees already. So we can figure out that the European Union is also speeding up on ESG issues and producing more and more regulation to accompany European players in all sectors to take into account more and more sustainable issues, and especially ESG issues, not only sustainability issues. What we consider as change is that little by little, the European regulation can be even more demanding than the national one. We were not used to it in France. For instance, some company listed especially had to publish every year a CSR report since 2012. And you know, the European Union was a bit late about this. Now the regulation is stronger in Europe than in France. So you know it is moving much faster. Another example was about mapping climate risk. In France, we used to have regulation for investors about mapping climate risk since 2015. And now we have this example with the SFDR regulation that some unlisted companies had to deal with within 4 or 5 months last year. So the regulation from Europe are more and more demanding. And also, the number of regulation is growing much faster than before, especially with the new plan on sustainable finance. To conclude, there are 3 key points that need to be followed, especially about European context, regulatory context. I would say the taxonomy. To us, this taxonomy with its 6 environmental objectives will be a tsunami for all sectors about ESG, because it will structurate how we report on the objective, what is important, what is not, and maybe it will replace or take a good part on all the certification and label industry. The second point is about EPC. You know that EPC exists since a long time. They are calculated in each countries in order to be able to compare it from one country to another we need to have a table of comparison because most of criteria of the taxonomy rely on this EPC. So if you want to understand why this building is green in this country, it is not green in this country, you have to understand very well and deeply what is the EPC. And at the end, understanding national decarbonization pathway in the real estate sector is important, especially when you have a European strategy and you need to set objectives for your portfolio in this country, you have to understand how the regulation, the national regulation works about it. So at the end, we will go on following all the directive, but we will especially focus on these 3 points. Regarding the real estate context, French players have been investing more and more in European countries, and they have this need I was speaking about on harmonizing strategy and action plans on sustainable finance. For example, as I was saying, it is really difficult to compare the energy performance of a French building with others, and also the, I would say, climate performance, because the indicators are not the same. The energetic mix is not the same from one country to another. And there is, in France, we produce since 10 years barometer of the energy performance. The BBP also produced the same kind of annual study. We didn't find study the same way in all European countries. So there is a strong need to get real data and to know what are the benchmark for logistic building or for office building, at least in the countries such as Germany, Netherlands, Italy, Spain. That's it. Another example is about climate risk mapping. As you may know, we developed a mapping tool, a free tool, open source tool, and open data tool, which is called BATADAPT. BATADAPT until now is only working for the French, for France. And little by little, more and more real estate players are telling us that they would like to harmonize their way of doing physical risk mapping on climate change from France to other countries. So we have to extend this tool to Europe. So I will now explain what is our strategic issues in this program is to create little by little the skeleton of an OID-like European network, which will be composed by non-profit players, independent and focusing on leveling up ESG practices for the real estate industry. We strongly believe that OID is a BBP-like, such as the BBP is a OID-like non-profit organization, as we are independent from the certification industry, from the label industry, or from lucrative businesses. And as the BBP, we produce studies, tools, and what we do is open source and is open to anybody. So this is the first point. The second point is to provide free and independent watch on ESG issues for the real estate sector. So go faster, go together. This could be a punchline. Concretely, first goal, to provide a technical and regulatory watch in European country at the level of the European Commission. Secondly, to produce benchmarks of real estate sustainable industry, such as GHG emissions, energy performance certification, decarbonization pathways. And third goal, to extend our adaptation French mapping to BAT-ADAPT at the European level. So for the people who know us, they know that we didn't wait this webinar to start, so we are already working on the future BAT-ADAPT Europe. We already have some studies that I will show you a little later. This is our three main focus at the beginning of this program. All these resources will be available on a European platform. I just put here a screenshot of Taloen. Taloen is a French one. Taloen is about 200 resources on each ESG issues. There are tools, parameters, studies, watch, etc., etc. Here is a screenshot of the way BAT-ADAPT work. You get an address, or you can also get a portfolio with 100, 2,000 assets. From our tool, you get a kind of scorecard for each building with a level of risk, with actions related to the risks. And at the end, at the 6 or 5, you can get everything on the map or everything in a data files to use it as the way you want. So the point today is to extend the first screenshot, the one, to all Europe. There is also another issue about this, is to make that this tool can respond to some criteria of the taxonomy. This is important too. About what we did, thanks to the support of Ademe and a group of sponsors and partners, we have been working on a new e-learning courses about adaptation of building to climate change. This is free. This will be launched in November 9th. And this is in French and English. So if you are interested, you will have the link at the end, by the end of this webinar. Another action we already did with the Global Alliance for Building and Construction, still on climate change adaptation. Since 2018, we are working on this project, a call for action to policymaker and real estate industry about the way to onboard climate change adaptation in its strategy. So at the end, we have 5 recommendations. I think this guide is available on the French Ministry website, UNEP website, and GABC website. And it will be introduced during the next COP26. And at the end, in 2019, we already compared EPC's methodologies throughout Europe. But as I explained it before, since the taxonomy has some criteria, strategic criteria on EPC defining green building, this is really important to understand what are the different calculations from one country to another. Even if we did it in 2019, for instance, in France, it already changed. We have a new EPC for residential buildings. So I guess this is the same in most of countries in Europe. It is moving quite often. So this, to very understand well how EPC are calculated and to get real benchmark data is very important to set a green building strategy, I would say. Well, thank you, Laura. I don't know if it was too long or not. What I just wanted to say to conclude that we are forecasting to provide a first platform by the end of the year. We will do overviews on regulatory and technical issues for the strategic countries within October or November. The first overview will be about Germany, I guess. So you will hear about the program, and the first resources will be available quite soon. Thank you very much and have a good webinar. Bye-bye. Maybe they will have question, but I think the question at the end. Okay, so see you later.
Thank you very much, Lois. So when we wanted to launch a European program that would bring together European actors on sustainable issues for real estate, we contacted the Better Buildings Partnership. We have been working in partnership with the BBP, our counterpart in the UK, since several years. And it was therefore quite natural that we turned to the BBP since some of our work topics are very similar. And we both agree on the fact that real estate players need to integrate ESG issues on a European scale and understand what is happening in their neighboring countries. So I will not be longer. I will just give the floor to Sarah Radcliffe, who is going to present you their approach. So I will let you share your screen, Sarah.
Great. Thanks very much, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen and check that everyone can see that. Can I get a thumbs up from Laura if everyone can see that?
Yeah, it's working.
Brilliant. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here to talk to you a little bit today about the work that we've been doing in the Better Buildings Partnership. I'm Sarah Ratcliffe. I'm CEO of the Better Buildings Partnership. I'm going to start off just by giving you a brief introduction to the Better Buildings Partnership. So if I can get my slides to move on. There we go. So the BBP has been in place since 2008 in the UK, and it's a collaboration of many of the UK's leading property owners, and their focus is on improving the sustainability of existing commercial buildings. We're a not-for-profit business, and we're owned and run by our members. So our aims are really around actually using the strength of our membership to enable market transformation. And I'm going to explain to you today a little bit about how we go about that. Before I do, these are a list of our members. We currently have 44 members with over 270 billion worth of assets under management in the UK. And I'm sure some of those names will be familiar to some of you on this call today. We also have a related organisation that we run called the Managing Agents Partnership. This is a similar organisation with similar objectives, but is very much focused on the property managers who are responsible for delivering sustainability for those property owners. And we have 13 managing agents in that partnership with over 26,000 properties in the UK under their management. So what we do, there are a number of different things we do at the BBP. So first of all, we share knowledge, and we do that through a number of working groups, through round tables, through developing a case study portfolio, and obviously through the usual kind of blogs, communications and events. We also use our membership to develop common approaches to sustainability issues. And we do that through a number of different outputs that we produce, toolkits, guidance notes and industry insights, all of which are freely available to the whole industry. And then finally, we seek to demonstrate leadership on sustainability issues. So whilst we're a very practical organisation in terms of supporting our members, we also try to use their collective strength to drive sustainability issues forward within our sector. And we do that through lots of different means, but most significant is our member commitments that we have, and also collaborating with lots of organisations across the industry. And of course, we're delighted to be here with the OID today, who we have collaborated with for quite some time now. And of course, the important question is, why do we do all of that? Well, our main objectives are around enabling our members to have buildings, deliver buildings that perform better, to also improve professional understanding of sustainability issues, and to stimulate market transformation. So that's really why we're doing all of this. And what I'm going to do today is just take you through some examples of things in our work programme that help to illustrate those objectives. Before I do that, I just thought it might be helpful to show you the different work streams that we have at BBP. These really provide an overview of our whole programme of work, not all of which I can talk through today. But we have some major work streams. We've got one on market transformation. So that's really about driving the market forward. And we can see that at the moment, under that work stream, we've got two really important areas of work. Lots of work around net zero and also around climate resilience, which Louis has obviously mentioned OID's work in those areas as well. We have an investment and lending work stream. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about our European Working Group and what they do today. We have a measurement and benchmarking work stream, and there are a number of different things that come underneath that. Again, I'm going to give you some examples later on. We also help our members share information on building innovation and technology. And then also we talk about property management and the importance of that, and occupier engagement. So that's our whole work stream. But today I just wanted to give you some highlights of our work programme over the last year or so that you can get a really good understanding of some of the practical things that we do at the BBP. So first of all, one of the big projects that we have running at the moment is our BBP Climate Commitment. This climate commitment was developed following a directors' dinner that we had back in 2019, where our members said that whilst they were acting individually to address climate change, that they wanted to join together to sign a commitment that would help demonstrate leadership in the industry. And we now have 26 members who are signatories to that climate commitment. And that climate commitment, because it covers both UK, European, and in some cases global portfolios, covers around 375 billion worth of assets under management. What's in that commitment? Well, first of all, the signatories need to publish their net zero carbon pathways. That's a plan, essentially, as to how they're going to get to net zero carbon. And some really important things about that commitment. It covers operational carbon, but including whole building performance. So that's also tenant emissions, occupier emissions. It covers the embodied carbon of development, refurbishment and fit out work. So making sure that we're including all the carbon throughout the life cycle of the building. And also really importantly, it must follow the principles of the energy hierarchy. So the idea that you can have a net zero carbon pathway which just relies on offsetting is not acceptable. It must follow the principles of the energy hierarchy. They must annually disclose their progress towards those net zero carbon pathways, so we can see how quickly they're progressing, not only individually, but also as a sector. And they must publicly disclose the energy performance of their portfolios. This is really important in the UK. We don't have a public disclosure scheme for energy performance in use. And so this is a voluntary commitment to do exactly that. And then finally, by the end of 22, signatories must have comprehensive climate change resilience strategies in place. So that's the commitment. To support that at the BBP, we developed a net zero carbon pathway framework. This is freely available and can be used by anyone, but it was really to ensure that when organisations were taking that commitment, that there was consistent reporting against how they were implementing it. And so now that we're in 2021, many of the, in fact, all of the signatories have to that commitment have now published their net zero carbon pathways. And these are a really vital resource for any organisation looking to develop net zero carbon pathways. They're all slightly different, but they all share the aim of getting to net zero carbon for their investment portfolios. So secondly, I wanted to talk about our owner and occupier forum. That was launched as a commitment that we made in 2019 at the BBP to help get closer collaboration between owners and occupiers. And this was identified as a key issue in terms of addressing Scope 3 emissions. So we have launched an owner-occupier forum in 2020, and you can see some of the members of the forum on that screen. We're supported by a wide range of partners in that as well, demonstrating our commitment to collaborating across the industry. And we're working at the moment on a thought leadership project, on a data sharing protocol, and on sustainability matchmaking, which is all about making sure that owners and occupiers know who to talk to in their respective organisations about sustainability. In terms of improving professional understanding, one of the things that we've done in the last year is to develop and launch an ESG training course, primarily aimed at real estate asset managers. This was developed as a result of demand from our members who felt that there weren't appropriate training opportunities for asset managers. And the response to this course has been unprecedented. We've had 300 participants registered in the first 6 months, demonstrating there was a real gap in knowledge there. We're really delighted with the 45 organisations who have committed their asset managers to go on that course. We only started delivering that course in June, but we're fully booked almost to the end of the year. So that's a really good example of us filling a gap there that was desperately needed in the market. On a more practical level, we've also recently produced a responsible property management toolkit. So this was really aimed at those individuals and departments that are responsible for delivering property management across large portfolios. And this toolkit is very practical, has 13 checklists across a wide range of sustainability issues with associated guidance notes and case studies. And again, it's freely available to the industry. And then finally, on buildings that perform better, we have two really important initiatives. The first one is our real estate environmental benchmark, and this is where we gather performance on use from our members, and they submit their data each year to our real estate environmental benchmark. And that means that we're able to produce industry benchmarks and help to inform the wider industry about how the commercial property is performing. And again, all of those real estate benchmark findings are made publicly available. And then finally, on buildings that perform better, we have our Design for Performance project. This is a really important project to try and bridge the performance gap between how buildings are designed and how they perform in use. We've been working on this project since 2015 with an initial feasibility study that looked at the potential to bring a neighbours-like rating system to the UK for new buildings and existing buildings, particularly focusing on offices. So there was a feasibility study followed by a pilot programme that was supported by 12 Design for Performance pioneering leading developers in the UK. And then following that, we actually moved forward to launch the scheme in 2020. And I'm delighted to say that we were able, therefore, to launch Neighbours UK in November last year, with the launch supported by the Minister for State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. That's where he was at the time. He's now changed his role. But he was there supporting, and we launched it with 13 pioneering projects. So projects that are actually implementing this on major office buildings in the UK. And that project is supported by a wide range of industry bodies, delivery partners, but is also being administrated now by BRE. So really great progress, fantastic project, that one. And a huge wide range of industry support. So again, a much needed project. If you want to read a little bit more about the BBP, we have got our impact reports available on our website. So please do go and have a look at those. They're really good insight into what we are doing to create as much impact as we possibly can with our members. Then finally, for the purposes of today, I just wanted to briefly touch on what we're doing with our European working group. Obviously, that's highly relevant to today's discussion. This is a working group that we formed because a number of our members have European portfolios, and they wanted to understand how they could liaise with one another more closely, share knowledge and understand what was happening across Europe. So we have a number of round tables that we've undertaken, which include looking at things like European legislation, looking at utilities procurement and data collection, looking at tenant utility data capture, looking in more depth at some specific regulations like the ELAN regulations and SFDR. And we're also moving on to look at some future topics, looking at property management practices across Europe, and also continuing the important work to look at energy data management. And we're really also excited to talk to the OID about how we can maybe share some of those roundtables and knowledge together. So I think just to finish on European collaboration and why this is important. It's obviously really important for the industry, and I'm sure nobody needs me to emphasize that today, but there is significant urgency concerning action on climate change. And obviously that has no geographical boundaries. And so it's really important that we work together to try and address that. We need to scale up action across Europe. And one of the ways of doing that is to make the best use of what we already have, and so that we don't spend time duplicating or reinventing the wheel of what already exists. And if we work together collaboratively, we can do that really efficiently and effectively. And the third thing is a really important thing is that we need to mobilize public and private sector finance in sustainable real estate. If we're really going to deliver on those climate change goals. And the only way we can really do that is speaking to those investors, and those investors often have global European remits. So we need to be able to work on the same scale that they're working. For our members, why is this important? Obviously, our members are property owners, but often managing their investments on others' behalf. And many of their stakeholders are European investors and indeed global or European occupiers. And both those investors and occupiers are driving change, not just in the UK, but across the whole of Europe. So it's really important for our members to be able to demonstrate that they're responding to this across Europe. Of course, and indeed, we know from speaking to OID that we share many common challenges across European assets. And there are just a couple of examples there: reporting, data collection, climate resilience. I could go on. Those challenges are common, and so really helpful to share knowledge and good practice there. For our members, there's an issue of consistency. Quite often these portfolios are not necessarily managed with distinct geographical boundaries. They're managed across different geographies. And so there's need for a consistency of approach across those portfolios and assets. It is really difficult, and I'm sure we're all finding this at the moment, to keep pace with legislation and developments in sustainability good practice. And so if we work together to do that, we might be able to make that task easier. One of the key advantages of the BBP is the ability for our members to share best practice with one another. And of course, that's not only in relation to the UK. We'd like to share that best practice and learn from best practice in other countries. And the final thing is that the need to embed sustainability investment decision-making into each country. And so at the BBP, we know how our members are working to do that in their UK portfolios, but obviously we're really keen to see how they do that across Europe as well. So I hope that's a helpful presentation, an overview of what BBP does, and an indication of why we think greater European collaboration is going to be really critical going forward. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for this presentation, and congratulations for the work conducted by the BBP. Indeed, we have a lot in common, and we'll continue working together on this subject, of course. So as Lois said before, as part of our program, we are going to produce benchmarks of real estate sustainable topics to extend our adaptation tool. And we also want to focus on low carbon pathways and what they mean for the real estate sector across Europe. So related to this issue, we have invited Ademe, so the French Agency for Ecological Transition, to present the initiative launched jointly with the CDP, the ACT initiative. And so I will let Anatole and Edouard present this initiative.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, the OID, for the invitation. First, can you see my screen? Is it okay on your side?
Yes.
Yes, okay, perfect, thanks. So yes, I'm Edouard Fordrin, working in Ademe, which is a French agency for ecological transition. And I'm today with Anatole in order to present you the ACT initiative. I will start about the presentation of the ACT initiative, and Anatole will follow with how ACT initiative can be implemented by real estate asset managers. So ACT initiative, as you said, Laura, is an initiative which is linked to the objective number 2 of your program, and ACT means assessing low carbon transition. That means that we want to provide to companies tools and methods in order to help them to make progress on low carbon transition, and to have a strategy on low carbon transition that are aligned with the Paris Agreement goals. So that's the main objective of the ACT initiative, and it's an initiative which is international, funded by Ademe and the CDP, and it's an initiative which is part of the global climate action of UNFCCC, and it was funded, and it is funded by Europe, like Climate Kick and LIFE program, but also by Ademe and by FFEM. And so we have, inside the ACT initiative, we have two approaches. The first one is how to make progress on low carbon transition and how to develop a low carbon strategy. This is the ACT step-by-step approach. And we have, at the end, another approach to assess, to evaluate if the low carbon strategy is aligned with the Paris Agreement goal. This is the ACT assessment side of the ACT initiative. And I will do a focus on this part. So about ACT assessment, how does it work? It's an assessment, so at the end, it's a score for companies in order to know if the low carbon strategy is well aligned with sectoral low carbon pathway. Here, for example, for real estate, but it's also for other sectors. And at the end, you have 3 scores. The first one is a performance score between 0 and 20. And it's assessed thanks to different modules and different indicators, which are for us the most important one in order to cover the full aspect of a low carbon strategy. That means that we are looking at targets in terms of GHG emission reduction, and if the targets are aligned with the sectoral decarbonisation pathway. This is very similar to another initiative, which is science-based targets. You may know in the overview in the panorama. But for us, the targets in terms of GHG emission reduction are necessary, but it's not enough. We need also to consider the actions implemented by the company in order to know if it's consistent and if the actions will allow the company to achieve the goals at the end. That's why we are looking at, for example, material investment and how the company invests on the reduction of GHG emission for their assets, but also on their products. We are looking also for some sectors on R&D expenditures in low carbon transition. And we are looking in a more qualitative way about how the low carbon transition is managed internally, how it is done with the supplier and with the clients of the company in order to have the value chain in the scope, how the company does policy engagement on this topic, and is the company thinking about new business model in order to be viable in a low carbon economy. So thanks to these 9 modules, we assess the performance of the company in terms of low carbon transition and the ambition of the low carbon transition. And after we have 2 other scores, a narrative score between A and E, which is a score assessed by an evaluator, which is an external point of view of the performance of the company, and the trend score, which is a plus, a minus, or equal, which reflects the dynamic of the company in this topic. And so this is the main scheme for the assessment of ACT. And of course, this assessment is different between sectors. We developed a lot of methodologies for different sectors, GHG emitting sectors. We are finalizing the different sectors we want to cover. For example, we developed a method for auto manufacturer, for transport, etc. But we also, what is interesting today, we develop also a methodology for building sector and for the real estate sector, which are available. You can go to the ACT website to consult the methodologies, and I will provide you the link just at the end of the webinar. And for the ACT building methodology, so the scope of this methodology is divided into 3 parts. It's for building constructors, it's also for property developers, and also for real estate. We developed this methodology in 2019, thanks to technical support provided by EY, CSTB, and iCare and Consult. And thanks to a technical working group we set up, gathering experts from the sector. And for example, we had some members of OID who participated to this methodology development. And this methodology was after experimented also in 2019 with 7 French companies. We had, for example, Bouygues Construction, ICAD, Nexity, Réalité, Veolia, Vinci Immobilier, and Léon Gross. And with these 7 companies, we obtained an average score of 7 in the performance score, which is quite close to to 10, and which is quite similar with the other sectors we also assess thanks to the ACT initiative. And for the other score, it was a B for narrative score and a plus for the trend score. So the dynamic was very good. In order to go into details, just key learnings about this experimentation. About targets, almost all companies had GHG targets, GHG reduction targets, which was very important, but with a diversity of targets. Sometimes the targets was in an absolute, sometimes it was in intensity. These targets were available, but quite in a short, medium term. That means that the time horizon was mostly 20, 30, but yeah, in this topic, the sample of companies obtained quite a good score. About the transition plan, so about the actions, it was more balanced. Some companies had a transition plan, and some others were in the stage of the definition of the transition plan. And so at the time of the experimentation, it was not robust enough to present a real transition plan. In terms of GHG monitoring, GHG reporting, the majority of companies had integrated GHG emission in their reporting, but we observed a large diversity of reporting in the scope of the reporting, but also in the way to calculate the GHG emission. So it was interesting, but on the other hand, there are a lot of diversity in terms of practices. About the past, we had some GHG information in the past of the companies, but not always. So it was a difficulty for this sector. And about the business model and the transformation, the companies had well understood the integration and the necessity to transform their business model, so that it was also quite interesting. So in a way, this approach and the low carbon strategy was considered by the companies at the time of the road test, but there were some things to improve in order to be more aligned with the sectoral low carbon pathway and to contribute more to the achievement of the Paris Agreement goal. And I will leave now the floor to Anatole to give us an overview on how ACT, which is at a company level, can also help real estate asset managers in order to progress and to work also on this topic.
Yes, thank you, Edouard, and thank you for the transition. Because actually, as you just mentioned, the ACT initiative focuses on companies, but when we talk about companies, we also have to talk about stakeholders. And this is why one of our work currently with WBA is quite interesting for stakeholders, because it's about peers benchmarks. And notably one coming on the building and construction sector for autumn 2022. So to date, we have benchmarks on automotive, electric utilities, and oil and gas. So this is not going to be interesting for you, but yeah, in the coming year, some around 50 big companies are going to be ranked, and we know that it's quite interesting to get this information for stakeholders. So it was to mention it, and it's really a good work doing by the WBA, which is an NGO doing benchmark according to the ODD, and notably the ODD 13 on climate energy. So next slide, please, Edward. So as you just said also, Edward, ACT initiative focus on company. And we have noticed that this philosophy was adaptable to real estate funds by considering the fund as a company globally, and considering all the investment line, so all the company invested in, as assets. And we have already made an assessment of a fund, so it's confidential. But the result of the assessment is confidential. But we have managed to give a global scoring of the fund. So what is interesting is that we can have a global scoring of the fund, as I just said. We can also have the trend, and it gives a real idea of the performance and of the contribution of the fund to the ecological transition. Sorry, I'm sneezing. So yes, so I think that's it's an important information to get if you are working in this type of finance industry. Yeah, so that's all for this slide. And yes, just a focus on the result that we can get. So basically, when we adapt the ACT assessment from a company to an investment fund, we have to adapt some modules, not in their way of computing information, but more on the philosophical way of approaching the ecological stakes. For instance, on the targets, we are not going to analyze the targets by assets, but more to analyze the target of the fund. So, for instance, if the asset manager, if the asset manager wants his funds to reduce GHG emissions from 50%, for instance, on the weather scope 1, 2, or 3, but we will take these targets as a reference for all the fund and all the assets associated to the fund. So basically, this is why this is one of the results and global results we can get from an ACT assessment on the performance side. So here you can see that the performance of the company is quite low on some indicators. What is important to know is that indicators are also weighted. So, for instance, the target module doesn't have the same importance in the scoring than the management scoring, for instance, or the supplier scoring. So, what is interesting also is that you can see where your company stands among the global scoring of the sector. And so, yeah, just one last word is that the performance score, as Edward mentioned it, is divided between quantitative modules and qualitative ones. And just the next slide to give a quick focus, and also as a quick teasing, if you want to know more and get trained to ACT assessment or to get involved to assess your fund. For instance, this is one of the results we can get on the target module. So basically we input the targets of the fund, and we analyze. We compare these targets to what has to be done by the sector, what has to be done by the company, where the company is actually going, and where so thanks to this graphics, we measure gap, commitment gap, action gap, and we deduce scoring according to the distance between the different graphs. And yeah, so when I'm saying company here, you have to understand that you can replace company by fund. And so that's all for me.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Sorry, it might be a bit noisy here, but there are construction works around our building, so sorry for that. But thank you very much, Anatole and Edouard, for the presentation. And yes, indeed, it's very important to have international tools and sectoral methodologies so that the real estate sectors, the real estate actors, can integrate ESG topics into their strategies. So our European program will contribute to these goals in producing benchmarks and providing a technical and regulatory watch, among others. And so I will just let the floor to Lois to say the last word.
Okay. Well, I will be shorter then. So we are running out of time. So I really want to thank our speakers. I was just saying that the name of the program will be communicated soon. We will brainstorm about it with the sponsors. And to conclude, I wanted to add that one objective of the program is to make to offer visibility to all the initiatives that are going in the good way. And it's especially what we did today, why we invited Ademe to introduce ACT, why we invited the BBP with us, is that together we can share our resources and make them know to our communities. That's it. So I really want to thank you. I think that is 10:06, so we will not take questions because everybody has an agenda. So thank you and see you soon for the next steps. Thank you.